Well, we've had at least 2 people with symptoms who have been symptomatic as well, and have informed us of that. And the CDC then advises us it's not a confirmed situation, but that the district or the school had at least 2 people, as it needs to. And so when we started doing contact tracing on what the CDC calls a presumed positive but not confirmed, and we don't have to act on anything that's not confirmed, but we decided to act on a presumed positive, where we had another person who was symptomatic. And so today we ended up sending several students home who were contact tracer, had some contact tracing, or were in close contact with the second person who is not confirmed. But we just decided to do our due diligence and send those folks home. We also had several staff members this person had come in contact with, and we did our due diligence, and out of just caution sent this person home. We're waiting test results. We also have another individual who we found out at the end of the day is symptomatic. Again, we don't know if this is just the flu or if it's COVID. So we're asking for testing. So that's why these things evolve. But because we had to send a number of staff home, and we did cover the school for the rest of the day, I want to thank, we had a bunch of staff that went over to Mabel Wilson School this afternoon. Most of our central office staff were over there. We had a few staff members from other buildings that we had reassigned over there as well, so we appreciate that. But when that happens tomorrow, we're projecting, I think the number is actually higher than this right now, but last count we had 26 staff that wouldn't be in the building tomorrow, because of COVID related, whether they, because they're contact. I'm not saying that they're. But when that happens tomorrow, because there's some sort of a close contact with either the person who has a positive case or is presumed positive, then we've taken the liberty to make sure they're not in the school. I believe that number has gone up from 26 since I last checked, because we were checking on 2 other staff members as well that probably won't be able to come back as well. Once we get test results, it gives us an indication what we can do. Either they're negative and then we're fine, or they're positive test results and we don't have those results right now. And if they're positive, that means that we have to continue quarantining everyone that we've sent home. And so for tomorrow, we just quite literally don't have enough staff to open the building safely. So that's why I made the decision not to have school tomorrow. And that was one of the factors that at the beginning, and it's in the pandemic plan, that would cause a school to close. So it doesn't mean that we have an outbreak. We have no confirmed cases beyond the 1 case that we have. The CDC calls an outbreak 3 or more cases in the same school. So right now, they're not saying that we have that, and I'm not saying it either. We're just waiting test results on 2 other people. So we just don't have enough staff to open tomorrow safely. Even with a bunch of us going over and helping, it wouldn't still be enough people. So that's why we're in that situation. We have now 90 students. We had 80 students that were out. Now we have 90 students who are out at this point, being quarantined. So even that number has moved a little bit this afternoon. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And I think the good news is I'd like to give huge praise to our nurses. All of our nurses in our district were at Mabel Wilson School doing phone calls to families yesterday. Our administrators at Mabel Wilson, Sally Laughlin and Corey Muncie, were on the phone calling families, talking to parents yesterday, and I certainly had several meetings with them today to talk about staffing and where we're at and all that. So I really want to give a big thank you to all of them, especially Christina Gibbons. She really kind of took the lead as the nurse, one of the 2 nurses at the Wilson School, in helping us figure this out and communicate with the CDC and all that. So that's where we're at, and that's why the school building is closed. We're reverting to a remote day tomorrow for cohort A at Mabel Wilson School. And we'll see about Thursday. I just don't know. Hopefully we'll have more information tomorrow about what's going on.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. I wonder if there are any questions, welcome to add them to the comment, or if we want to move on and ask questions offline. I just didn't want to not acknowledge where we are in the past 2 days while we're all together. And I also want to say thank you to the nurses and everyone for a clean process, and we'll learn a bit from this and apply the same consistent process. If we have to do this again, let's hope it's an if. So thank you to everyone. Does anyone have any questions or items that they'd like to bring up while we're here together, or feel free to send them along offline?
Tyler, I have just a quick question. Jeff, how many staff members and students are in total at MIW? Just to see percentage-wise what we're dealing with.
So we would have been at 710 students to open the school, but we have students that homeschooled, et cetera. And I don't have an actual number. I'll give you an estimate. We're about 650 students right now. And we have about 100 staff members at Mabel Wilson School. And so on any given day, we have about 300 students who are in the building, depending on the cohort they're in.
Could I ask a quick question, Chair McGinley?
Absolutely.
Jeff, do we know if the two other secondary cases which haven't been confirmed, are they students or are they staff, or are you not allowed to say?
We're supposed to keep it at the individual level.
Okay.
That's a kind of a guideline, I guess you could say, that we've been advised to just keep it at the individual level.
Okay, I respect that.
Yeah, it'd be easier if I could say, but I don't feel like I can.
Does anyone else have any questions? Okay. Thank you, Jeff, for that update. I know it's appreciated. So we'll move on to our discussion and items for action tonight, which is approval of the second round of CARE funds. And there's a document within the board packet that outlines what the Finance Committee is recommending. And Kevin, I will kick this over to you, and maybe Scott.
Sorry, I muted before. I will share that in 1 second, but with your indulgence, could I just update as far as our finance meeting on Friday with those two RFP discussions? Okay. So just a couple things, my friends, to update on some outdoor seating that would be on the hill below the GCA. We had 3 bids, three organizations, 3 companies submit bids for that outdoor learning space, consistent with our discussions in the first round of CARES funds. And we have selected, are we allowed to say that they've been communicated with, Mr. Pullen?
Selected and communicated.
Okay. The firm that submitted the most attractive bid was MJ Story, with a deep level of experience on campus, as did each of the other organizations. But they're going to begin work with a targeted mid-November completion date for some outdoor seating on that hill just below the GCA. One other piece that we spent quite a bit of time on at the last round of CARES funds was talking about network and live streaming projects. And pleased to report that there were 7 companies that registered to bid on to submit a proposal. There were 3 vendors that submitted RFPs. And based on that information, as well as the careful consideration by the IT staff, as well as Mr. Pullen and Mr. Porter. The way that looks like is this: there's going to be 3 organizations, 3 companies providing solutions, and we're happy to share some additional information. But very quickly, the systems engineering, which is a main organization, is going to be working on network upgrades. They are going to provide network upgrades. They're going to provide the access points as well as the labor. The total amount of their successful proposal was $344,972. Cascading downward, we've got from Connectivity Point. They're going to be responsible for the fiber installation and upgrade on campus. And their piece of that came in at $90,111. And then finally, Xerox Distance Learning Solutions is going to provide, Xerox is going to provide a distance learning solution. And there's two parts to theirs, which is that distance learning component, the software that drives that, as well as the projectors. One piece of that is coming in at $198,354, and the projectors are coming in at $135,093 for a total award of $33,447. This came in favorable to the district in terms of what we had budgeted and what the final number was. The difference between that, you had approved as a board 900,000. We came in 131,500 below that. This was really some fine work by the folks in the Little Red Building, as well as Dirk Van Kuren and his team. Jeff and Scott, if I've missed anything on that, could you expand?
I would just, the only other thing I'd add is that the next step is obviously to, we're contacting the vendors right now, and to make sure that we get this in place. We'll have a work group that is going to work with Dirk and myself and Scott to kind of oversee this project. We'll have some teachers on that work group who will be helping us, as well as Chris Hoffman and Mari Trebelcock will also be, and Carol MacArthur. So just kind of a group that's overseeing this project. It's huge, and we want to make sure that we've got a lot of minds on this in terms of training and setting everything up, and making sure that we're getting people who are ready to do this and are willing and excited to kind of be on the front line of it. So
that's great. To answer the question by Mike Williams, that MJ Story bid was 117,200. And again, Scott and Jeff, if you want to speak to that at all, I'd obviously would love that, if you so choose.
I think you've covered it, Kevin.
Okay. Well, then humor me for a second.
Kevin, do you mind if I add one piece?
Please.
One of the things that we could discuss, which we'd have to take a look at, I believe, under the first round of the CRF funds, is I think we can transfer 10% from one project to another. So there may be the possibility of transferring $90,000 from the live streaming that we were talking about to another project, or we could look at an upgrade at MIW to some other issues which we've talked about in terms of a change order. So that's something that we'll probably want to talk about soon at finance.
Okay. Thanks for that. Tyler, I don't mean to overstep. I did see that Peter's name came up, if you want to recognize.
No, go ahead, Peter, ask your question.
A couple questions. One, on the does the hardware bid for the equipment, you said projectors, but does that include monitors, the CPU, and everything else as far as that's concerned?
I'm looking at, Dirk is responding yes. So I was going to defer to Dirk, and he did anyway. Dirk, if you want to come off mute and speak to any of that, that would be delightful as well.
Sure. Yeah, the distance learning piece that came in from the Xerox, which actually is going to be Headlight, which they've deferred it to Headlight, includes all the pieces that they'll need to do the distance learning.
Okay, thank you. And my second question comment goes to what Scott was just saying on the 10%. Again, kind of reiterating, and I know December 31st is a deadline, but I mean, anything that we can throw into Wilson that's not going to be part of a future capital thing, let's try to be as creative as we can.
Okay. I hope you didn't just go over the wall after that, Peter. So then, not seeing any other questions about those, I will reiterate that we'll put the minutes out from finance, and if you have any questions that I can answer, Jennifer, Tyler, as members of finance, and certainly Mr. Poulin being the expert on many of these things, you have every resource available to you. Please reach out. If you'll indulge me, then I'll move over to the second round of the CARES funds. And just to make it simple for everyone, I'm going to take us down through this list and enlist the support of Jeff as well as Scott on things that I may confuse the issue. If you have questions, we'll continue to pause through these. But so can somebody confirm that you can actually see this screen that I have up?
Yes.
Thank you. I do need that constant validation, Kate. So starting at the beginning, the first item is is Chromebooks as a replacement. As a result of COVID, the intensive use that's going on in grades 4 through 6, this is looking at continuing to acquire units for ones that have been overburdened and need replacement. The amount of that is being recommended by the committee is $262,000. iPads also for classroom projection, which will be utilized for a number of things, including Google Meets. These again are units that are faced with intensive usage as people are working remotely. iPads, again, getting the government rate, we have the lowest pricing possible, and there's $180,000 being allocated to that. The next topic, which was, I'll try to answer the question because it was confusing to me initially. These are stands for the iPads, and these enable the teachers and staff to be able to place these in a location so that they have access to these while they are conducting lessons. They can also be used by students as well. These will be related to all the iPads, the use of both students and staff, and the amount being allocated to this is $12,000. Related to both lines 1 and 2 here, cables that are required, obviously for connectivity for each of these tech purchases, there is $12,000 being allocated to that. The fifth item on this list is classroom amplification, and making it easier for the teachers to communicate with staff when they don't have a mask in front of their face is always something that is welcomed for the students. But right now, the difficulty in being able to speak up for a prolonged period of time and have students being able to hear them, this amplification is absolutely critical at this point. $30,000 has been allocated to that. And I will pause at the fifth item, Jeff and Scott, and ask if there's anything that you'd like to clarify that I may have butchered.
I'll just add that for the fifth item, we do have amplification devices in our district right now. We use them when students are in a classroom and they need a modification of some kind in the classroom to be able to hear the teacher better. They might be on a 504 plan or an IEP plan, which requires that we provide this. So we have a number of teachers that are already actually very used to using amplification devices in the classroom. So it's actually a really great teaching tool. And we have been getting staff members who have asked for something like that, not just for students that are struggling to hear in the classroom, but just on a regular basis because of the masks. And it would be easier for some of our teachers to be able to project and for kids to be able to hear them well in the classroom because of the masks. So I think it's there's a lot of interest in this item. We've located a product that I think looks like it's pretty promising.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. So that brings us to the 6th item on the list. And this is because we are not able to have spectators at any of the sporting events. This will allow us to do mobile live streaming at sporting events, allowing folks to be able to enjoy watching their athletes compete. Jeff, I am going to ask if you want to speak to this as well. We've allocated $16,000 to this investment.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is that we actually are planning to have our students live still. We've always been wanting to do this. We've been wanting to do this for years and years, to live stream our athletic events. And we now have YouTube Live, of course, that we have. And Dirk, if you want to jump in too, you've been very involved in this item. So this is up and running at this point, but it's not as, we actually can make this a lot more attractive for viewers to be able to watch games and be able to see plays, have replays. This is something that a lot of school districts have invested in. And because we are not able to have spectators at games at this point, this has really become a lifeline for parents and students. We have tons of students that usually come to games who are now watching our games live streamed, and to be able to invest in this kind of equipment is really, really critical for people to feel connected during these times. So Dirk, do you want to jump in? You're the one that kind of introduced a product to us that was really interesting and showed it to me the other day.
Sure. Basically, we've been doing live streaming with the board meeting equipment, but there's no sound capabilities or replay. And we've been talking about the video production classes taking this on in the future. So this really is going to allow your athletic department to run the entire production of a live streaming event. What they see now is basically just a broad camera, and this will give them the ability to really start producing quality programming for not only the athletic part, but the next point, the 7th line, the GCA live streaming, would also be where they could do band and chorus events live streamed, especially as we move into the holidays where they typically would have filled the GCA. Now they'll be able to push that out as well.
That's great. Thank you. I'll move us down to the 7th item, which also shockingly has to do with live streaming. And this is within the GCA, and this will allow us to continue to bring people in from the outside more effectively and more efficiently during this time of quarantine and COVID, but being able to have the right equipment that we need, video, speakers, monitors, and the switch boxes in order to pivot between those in real time. This will allow things like our meetings and other meetings that are held in that space, as well as other activities, as we're constrained with the number of folks that can be inside the theater. This has been recommended at $31,000. The 8th line on here, while this may seem confusing, this is all about helping people to adopt new technology. Early adopters are important as anybody tries to do something new. This is entitled an alpha group, so that the lead group for a live stream project within the classroom. This would be taking a pilot group of 15 staff and having them be the pioneers in moving into this live streaming space, providing the equipment that they need in order to be successful, and using those experiences to help the rest of the staff as they continue to adopt. I'm going to pause on this. Jeff, Dirk, anybody who wants to weigh in on what this pilot is?
Yeah, so we have eight teachers who have been live streaming, most of them at the high school. We have somebody at the middle school as well who's been live streaming. And they've been live streaming using a laptop and basically the camera in the laptop. It's pretty rudimentary, but it works. These are teachers who are really interested and very excited and understood the value of live streaming for students. Several of our teachers who have taken it on are math teachers at the high school. and they have found it to be absolutely critical for kids to get those skills and get those skills on a daily basis. So we're adding, and I think we're up to 16 now, if I remember, Dirk, that will actually be providing. We're able to get some equipment early outside of the order, in supporting another 8 people to do this, so that we can have a group of 16 people using this equipment and really kind of getting into it, and working with the work group that we are hoping to get up and running soon, so that we can get other teachers interested over the next couple of months as well. Dirk, do you have anything you want to add to that?
All I would say is that work group is going to be critical to this work, because what we want to make sure is that we want to know what the models are for the teaching the live streaming, because every different classroom, every teacher teaches a little bit different, and we want to match the equipment to the teacher, not the equipment to the other way. We don't want to just throw equipment at them and say, oh, this is how you're supposed to do it. We want the teachers to say, this is what I needed to do, and then we'll match the equipment to do that. And this group will work through that.
Yeah, when both of you were talking about this, I think from our perspective on the board, we absolutely must embrace the early adopters on this. It will make, will show us where successes can be, and will make it easier for everyone who follows them. So this seemed like a very worthwhile investment. Moving down to the 9th item on the page is all about Mabel I, and probably even more important as we think about what's going on today. But these short throw projectors, which will be more engaging within the classroom. This enables much of the things that if we make that move down there toward live streaming at some point, this will set them up for success, but it will be a better experience during times of COVID for the folks that are within that classroom. And I, again, will pause on this technology piece for either of you to amplify this.
Yeah, we do have teachers that are interested in live streaming at Mabel Wilson School. We don't want to hold them back. We have teachers who would, are going to be part of that early adopter group as well. The extra additional 8. We have at least 1 teacher from Mabel Wilson, probably 2, who will be sharing equipment at this point, at least from what we were discussing. And we do not have short throw projectors at Mabel Wilson, and without short throw projectors, live streaming equipment is very difficult to make work. So it's the only school we don't actually have it. Those projectors we're getting them at GMS 6-8, and then this will be the school that doesn't have them. So it's important that we get those.
That's good, thank you. Moving to the 10th item on the list, and this one I'll defer to Mr. Poulin when we talk about the need for 2 passenger vans. Given the size of those and the fact that we cannot fill them, there are gaps in our ability to transport the students right now, given the current social distancing constraints. Budgeted for this is $84,770. Scott, could you speak to this?
I think you just covered it, Kevin.
Wow. It sounds better when you say it, though. I want to be clear. The 11th item is COVID staffing.
Can I ask a question about the vans?
Please.
Is that that we would buy them, or is that for a lease? Because hopefully COVID is a finite period of time, or is it something that we're adding to our fleet?
Allow me to defer to Scott. Scott?
We would buy 2 vans outright.
Which does allow us to sustain that investment, Margot, over time. I think the Finance Committee felt pretty strongly that that was a great investment that solves the problem today, but provides a solid solution for the district moving forward.
Yeah, and considering that these funds are only until December 30th, and we know that the pandemic will be probably with us long beyond, leasing would not have worked. We would have not been able to do it beyond the 30th. So buying them outright made more sense.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. The 11th item, COVID staffing, and this is inclusive of a number of different things. We have to continue to focus on remote school staff and our long-term substitutes. The update that we received moments ago really speaks to that very, very clearly. Along column C over here, where you, so I'm pointing like you could see me, is social distancing, allowing for staff leads, and that piece of parental support so we can continue to help folks that are the primary provider of education to their children. There's a number of things that this will be able to support. And this is budgeted at the largest item on this page at $300,000. Jeff, would you like to amplify that?
Yeah, the reason that we have 300,000 on this page is that, as you know, we've been talking about this. We have had a lot of COVID-related expenses, and 300,000 certainly doesn't cover all of them. But for staffing, we've added 16 long-term substitutes, permanent substitutes for the year. We're not going to be able to have this money beyond the 30th of December. However, we're going to need those permanent substitutes for the entire school year. We know that. So what our strategy is, and Scott and I have been talking about this a lot, is to free up the operating budget as much as possible, so that any COVID-related staffing expenses that we've incurred should be in the CRF funds and not in our operating budget. Was the point behind the Congress passing this, is to free up the operating budget relief funds in the first place. So because those relief funds won't be available beyond December, we're making sure that we're preserving our substitute lines, for example. Those substitute lines have been used for COVID-related services since the beginning of the year. And we want to certainly make sure that those are charged to these relief funds. So that's really important. The remote school staff, we have hired staff members out of, all of our remote school staff are COVID-related, obviously, and we've been charging those salaries to, we need to be charging those salaries to CRF and not to the operating budget.
Yes. Good. Thank you. These next two items, 12 and 13, are remarkably similar, which you probably picked up on without me, but the cleaning equipment that is required, and this is some of the things that have been intensely used since we began this process, but to replace some of the worn equipment that's used daily, day in and day out, to maintain our facilities. The amount requested here will be $39,600. And immediately below that, cleaning supplies, which complement those devices, but also the ongoing need to ensure that we have proper cleanliness within each of the facilities. That second item, if you're playing along at home, is $26,373, and that is to allow us to get things on hand to continue through the end of the school year. Jeff or Scott, would you like to add any additional information?
Scott?
The equipment that we're looking at purchasing is to replace some of the floor machines we have, the ride-on floor machines that are taking a lot of effort right now, several times a day. And of course, the supplies are just as Kevin had said, are the ongoing supplies for the rest of the year, which will probably include much of the sanitizing equipment that we have, some of the fogging equipment, and those types of things for the facilities.
Thank you. The 14th and 15th are also very closely aligned. The 14th item is outdoor seating for campus. And this is focusing on things necessary to maintain and expand that outdoor learning spaces in different parts of campus. These include things like benches, tables, the fire-approved tents, or other things that will help that to become possible. That is recommended at $60,000. And I will pause in a second, but I want to bring in item 15 as well, which is focusing on outdoor classroom space. And this is fully aligned with that first item that we talked about from the First Cares Fund, that outdoor learning space below the GCA. The successful bid was above the amount that was initially requested in our discussions, and this $18,000 will close that gap to finish that. I will pause. Kate, I see a question about 14, and jump right in.
So the outdoor seating for campus at $60,000, what type of seating does that include?
Allow me to defer to Scott and Jeff on that.
Thank you.
Scott, do you want to take that one?
The outdoor seating would be, we had looked around and saw that maybe we could have benches that are similar to what you would see in a park area, where staff and students could gather around the district, and actually community could use them as well on the weekends. So just stationed in areas around the district. The other part of that seating for campus and stuff is, I believe we put a tent in there for, which isn't necessarily, it's under outdoor learning space. We put a tent in there to be covered for shaded space over to Greeley Middle School, because we don't have any shaded space over there right now, and something that could be, you know, picked up and moved and utilized in other areas if we ever wanted to. And if we decided to do something on the campus, we wouldn't have to like displace something and move it. We could, you know, use that and, you know, move it to another location if we were doing something else on the campus. So that's what's entailed in that area. And then the one below, 15, really has to do more with trying to just pick up some of the funds from the additional project that we're having Mike Story do. And that would just be some of the additional seating space out there on the hill.
Okay. And so for line 14, it doesn't include a bunch of picnic tables or, you know, I know we've talked about that. And I wonder if the health team has talked about picnic tables and how safe they are. I see some more on campus, and I do get worried that they're not really socially distant.
Yeah, the picnic tables were, I believe we were able to include those in round one.
Okay.
I'll take a look at that when we go back, but we did order a number of picnic tables. One of the biggest things that we heard from MIW, actually from some of the staff members, was just being able to go outside for lunch and possibly social distance, or even groups of, you know, staff being able to have a place they could go outside and have lunch as well. So we put those out there. They aren't, you know, we're having to have them built by Doughton's Construction, because nobody had picnic tables really in stock that we could just get and locate. So we're having them built, and so that's really what we were doing. Some for Mabel I. Wilson School, and some for over to the middle school.
Okay.
Thank you. Tyler, you can recognize yourself, but I too will recognize you.
Thank you. So it's funny, Kate, the picnic tables I can't believe we're back to picnic tables, because that's where we started, and then we had big plans, and now we're back to picnic tables. So I will say that I stepped in for Mike Williams at the last outdoor learning committee meeting this past, I think it was a couple days ago, maybe last week. And the feedback that we heard was that although the amphitheater space that is at the GCA is wonderful addition to the campus, it doesn't necessarily provide much option for Mabel Wilson on a day-to-day basis. Yes, it will be great for concerts, larger gatherings. And so two staff members from Mabel Wilson expressed the need for more picnic tables, as odd as that may sound, because they can put two together, space out, and have lunch outside. So if we're looking at what we can do with this 60,000, and I would suggest potentially maybe moving a little bit of this money around for this stuff, is they currently have 10 picnic tables. Their goal was to have 30. When they map out how they can use them, if they can have two teachers outside at the same time with two full classes, that's the numbers that they came up with. So I just wanted to not, it's just funny that we're still talking about picnic tables. And that was one of my like, what? We can't talk about picnic tables. It makes no sense. But we're back to there now. And then the other part about the tent, I want to challenge buying a tent with the possibility of exchanging that for buying materials for a shaded structure, because that money would be spent on a more long-term use. A tent, although it provides shade, isn't necessarily something that I think we would use as often as something that was permanent, once we had a better understanding from the town about what we can do with a shaded structure on campus, specifically at the middle school. So after speaking with Marie specifically during that meeting, she said, honestly, the biggest value that you could provide for outdoor learning for the middle school right now would be a permanent shaded structure, not a tent. So I just want to bring that up. I know that we've talked about these few things. And then also, can Kevin or Scott, can you remind me the final number again of the amphitheater space at the GCA?
Yes, the outdoor learning space below the GCA is 117,200.
Okay. All right. So that 18,000 is just a rounded up. Okay. Thank you. I originally heard it as 111. So I thought we were off by 7 there.
There's a very good chance I said that.
Okay. Well,
It was
just
not
wanted
intentional.
Right. Oh, sorry, Kevin. We do have another 10 picnic tables coming for MIW and another 10 for over to the middle school. We'd ordered 20 for each building. So we do have more coming. They're just taking some time to get built. So.
Okay, great.
Anything else you wanted to add on that, Scott?
All set. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay. Michael Williams, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be quick because both Kate and Tyler covered most of my questions, which is great. Really quick, I do want to echo Tyler's point about thinking longer term, specifically regarding the pergola. The one thing I would note, though, is that honestly, if we could do both, because the tent is certainly a near-term need, especially, and I know especially for the functional life skills folks at GMS. And you had mentioned potentially 90K that could be shifted from the first round because of the fantastic work from the finance team and Scott and folks to get that part of the live streaming budget down. So potentially that's a place where we could potentially meet multiple needs there and get funding for the pergola as well as getting the tents in as well.
Scott, just we had the only thing that gives me fear is when on the live streaming piece, I want to make sure that we do have a contingency on that if something goes sideways and a hole has to be dug. Now, I don't know the right number on that. I would assume that Scott and Dirk may have something in mind. But if there's money that can be freed up, Michael, the credit, of course, goes to these gentlemen who did the work on the RFP. But
I would be comfortable with just holding on to a 10% contingency until we get further into the project, which is probably in the, probably around that $70,000 range, just until we get further down the live streaming project. The other thing that we talked about too is that in order to be able to live stream from Mabel I. Wilson School, they will need some additional equipment to do that, because right now we're talking about the high school and the middle school. And so Dirk and Jeff and I have discussed that there may be the possibility of doing an upgrade or a change order to the project to include Mabel I. Wilson School. So that $90,000 or that $100,000 could already be spent 10 ways, and we probably need to have a further conversation about that.
Go ahead, Michael, if you want to continue with another question.
I just brought it up. I thought we weren't going to include MIW in live streaming. That was my understanding previously. Has that changed? Did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, we had that discussion ever so briefly during finance last week, but talking about there may be pockets in there where live streaming would make sense for, not, and Scott, fix me if I'm running amok here, but not the building, but some classrooms to accommodate people who need that experience of being streamed to. But Scott, Dirk, go ahead.
No, that was where we were at. No decision has been made. We were just discussing it.
I would encourage us not to prioritize that over additional outdoor learning space. Having kids sit in front of screens longer I would not prioritize that over more outdoor learning space. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you. Elias, you had a question.
So I guess just looking at the overall vision for outdoor seating on campus, are we thinking that is a multi-seasonal, like do we envision going into the winter? I know that was kind of something that happened back when influenza hit in like the 20s, but do we envision like going outside in winter coats, or is that more ideology, like based on ideology rather than something that will actually happen?
That's outside of my pay grade, so I'll defer to the superintendent and Scott.
Well, I would certainly hope that our students are going outside in the winter. We live in Maine, and I think there's opportunities. I think a lot of students should be outside, and we certainly have recess outside for younger kids. And now that we've opened our playgrounds on our younger and our elementary grades, I would hope that our older kids also are going outside for PE and to get breaks and all of that. So I don't think winter should hold us back. I'm not sure if the outdoor seating area would work in the winter, but I'm not sure I think it's more, fall and spring is my feeling on those areas. But we have a lot of months now in Maine that are warmer, so certainly would be utilized.
Thank you. Elias, a follow-up on that? Or are you good?
Well, yeah, I guess I was just asking it in the way, obviously, the more we can use the outdoor seating and the element of outdoor learning to decrease COVID risk, obviously, the better. But that definitely answered the question.
Okay, thank you. Peter, go ahead. I can't see visually, but
I am. Here I am. I don't really want to rain on anybody's parade as far as the outdoor thing, but I don't think that at this point we should be considering, other than what we've already done with the amphitheater, any kind of permanent seating or structures whatsoever. As I think everybody is aware that we are coming up over the next couple of months with a concept design for the entire campus, which is going to incorporate a possible primary school, changes to fields, changes to parking areas, access roads, what we may have to do in relation to any kind of drainage adjustments. So, tents, portable, anything would be fine, but I think it's totally irresponsible to put any kind of permanent structure up until we are further along with the whole concept design of the campus.
Thank you, Peter. Tyler, you were up next.
Thank you, Peter, for that background. And I agree with you that we would want to put anything up. My question is, though, should we wait another 2-3 years when these changes to our campus are done to provide something that's been asked for over and over and over again for the past 4 years, going on 5 years that I've been on the board? So as much as I appreciate that, I also think that there's plenty of ways that a covered structure that's no larger than a 10 by 20 space could be moved if it needed to be. So I also agree that we should not prioritize live streaming at the elementary level, and that we should look at how we can provide a need that has been asked for over a number of years that could provide a safe space outside. And if that means that we are using those funds to provide materials between now and December 30th, then that's how we should look at it, so that we could in the spring put up something that could be used in the following fall, knowing that we're not going to have a primary school next year on campus. So I know that there are a lot of other planning issues that go into something like this, but every time that this project has been brought up, it has been consistently met with a dead end road, and it's not a complicated thing. It's frustrating that we continue to hit this dead end road. And so I just want to be as mindful as we can to see if there is a creative way to provide this need for one of our larger schools.
My fear with the permanent structure over there falls in a couple different areas. And it's my understanding from these funds, I mean, permanent features are are difficult. And if there was a proposal or a blueprint on campus that showed that type of a structure that was recommended before these times of COVID, that would be something that would be disallowed. And honestly, my fear was, I know that a previous architect had sketched that on campus, and I would just be afraid that using these funds for that would force us back into our pocket later. Either this would be disallowed as we go to the state, it's a committee now as opposed to an individual. And then if it would be disallowed federally because it being that permanent structure. And I guess this comment's out of scope, but I love the idea of a covered structure, an outdoor learning space, but I'm wondering if this is the money to pay for that, or if it'd be something else that we should be budgeting for outside of COVID funds. And that's just my opinion, Tyler.
I'm happy to keep talking. We can go back to it if we feel like there's more discussion at the end.
Of course. Anne, did you want to weigh in, or just everybody can read the comment that you are in agreement with the MIW live streaming?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have anything else to add besides that. I mean, I think if anything, well, time wouldn't give us, our deadline wouldn't give us more time to learn, like if it would just be more limited to like third grade, or like kind of what that would look like at MIW. But I also agree, I'm not inclined to want to move forward on MIW live streaming. In regards to the outdoor structure or tent, though, Kevin, I had thought of your point of, if they would disqualify us using those funds for a permanent structure. I mean, even though it's something we have had planned or proposed in previous years, I think we could still make a strong argument that, COVID is what pushed us over the edge for it now. And, but I also understand not wanting to be penalized for it. That's all.
Fair enough. Thank you. Madison, you're up.
Yeah. So I just had some questions regarding like why. So we're clearly a school that cares about the arts. We built the whole performing arts center, whole new band rooms, chorus rooms. We hear about Madrinals, stuff like that. So during the winter, chorus and band just can't be outside. So what's going to happen with that? Or is there anything being done to help, curriculars like that, especially like gym as well? Like if we have to keep that 14 feet distance, what's going to happen with all of that?
Jeff, I'll defer to you.
I don't have a good answer for you, Madison. It is on our mind, though. We keep talking about it because as we head towards November, we're obviously going to be talking about this a lot more with band and chorus and being outdoors and being able to continue with that. It is something that I'm in a weekly group meeting that discusses these kinds of issues and what other districts are doing around us. And so it's something that's been on our agenda. We don't have an answer for it yet, but we're all trying to brainstorm what are ways to make sure that we're not, we don't want to get rid of these offerings just because it's getting colder. And what are some other alternatives? And I just don't have an answer for you right now. I think PE is definitely one that we have PE teachers that go outdoors with kids in the winter and do some winter units outside, and that's been way before COVID. That's just been going on every year. My guess is, and I think just a couple of conversations with PE teachers, is that they're going to expand that this year. They want to do more PE activities outdoors this year and kind of utilize the outdoors as part of their curriculum, which I think is terrific. And I suspect that a lot of teachers who may not have taken breaks as much in the winter with kids will be doing a lot more of that this winter. We've had a lot of teachers, especially at the younger grades, going out with their students around the track, et cetera, to get some air and exercise and all of that. And I assume that will something like that will continue throughout the winter. I think winter in Maine is long, and we might as well take advantage of it, and it's beautiful. It might be a little cold, but it's beautiful. So we certainly want people outdoors, and there's actually a lot of learning that goes on outdoors if you just go outdoors and sit for a little bit and look around. And there's a ton of science that goes on. So I've always been excited about the outdoors, and I hope that I know a lot of our staff are, and I hope to see more students outside in the winter this year than ever before. So that's my hope. But band and chorus, I don't have a good answer for you, Madison, and we are brainstorming, and it's definitely on our agenda to talk about.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mike, you had a comment and a question. What are our peers doing relative to permanent or temporary structures? Scott, we had talked briefly about this on Friday. Do you have any insight that you could share?
I don't know of anything permanent in Falmouth. I know we had Farmer Justin come to one of the meetings. I think, Mike, you remember that. I think you were there when you facilitated that. And they did a lot of temporary measures. That doesn't mean that something couldn't be done permanently if we wanted to consider it and put it through. The only piece that I would add, and I was talking to Jeff about this today, is between both these awards, it's $3 million in cash flow that we're going to be sitting on. So I'm a little nervous when we start, committing ourselves to a lot of these projects, because we have to front that money out, pay for the projects, and then assume that we're going to get reimbursed. So I get a little bit nervous sometimes when we do that. Now, certainly the things that we've got on our list are things that we could defend towards COVID and defend those items, but it is going to be a lot of cash flow out between now and December 31st. So that we can, that we'll be dealing with. I would be more apt, as people are talking about the permanent space and so forth, if there was interested in that pergola and so forth, I'd be more apt to try and fit it into round one than round two, because round one is probably got a lot more leniency in it, I guess, if we want to say that, as opposed to round two, which is a committee group. Round one has probably got more ability to get something like that passed if people wanted to go that route, which would require trying to get an adjustment to the round one budget and move to that. And again, that's solely if that's the direction that the board wants to go, but I wanted to let people know that.
Just wanted to jump in to your point, Scott. Justin did present Falmouth has a couple permanent structures to go with a lot of temporary work. They had already one greenhouse on their facility. I think they used COVID funds to expand that, and I think they're building another one. I'm doing this off of memory, so I'd need to double check that. But I know they at least have a greenhouse that they are putting work into expanding it, but I'm pretty sure they're attempting to build another one as well.
And I had conversations.
I knew they had the one greenhouse. Thank you.
I had conversations with some folks in a few other districts where they said they are completely staying away from anything that could be construed as permanent because of that fear that it would not meet the rigor to get the reimbursement. That's the piece that keeps me staring at the ceiling at night. Our colleagues on finance had to hear me go on diatribe about that on Friday. I just want to make sure that the things that we do are approved correctly here in Maine. And I know nobody is trying to do this any other way, but to get the approval that we need to move forward on each of these rounds, and then ensure that we've done it exactly as requested, so that the federal government, when they look at this later, say, yes, this was absolutely qualified in the work that you did. As Scott mentioned, I worry about the outlay of funds without the certainty of knowing that money's coming back. So those are the things that make me scared.
Permanent structures for those reasons, as well as the ones, frankly, that Mr. Bingham brought up. I'm a big believer in having a site plan and having our proverbial ducks in a row, and knowing what we're going to be doing on a go forward basis. So I'm not really in favor of permanent structures at this point in time. And also, frankly, I think, in the spirit of this is, frankly, temporary measures to get us through the pandemic. And I feel like, to a certain extent, by by building a bunch of permanent structures, we're kind of subverting that. So for those reasons, I'm not in favor of permanent structures. So I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in.
Thank you, Mike. Kate, you have a comment.
Well, first, a quick question. Do we have any concerns about this permanent stone amphitheater being a permanent structure on campus? And possibly not getting refunded or reimbursed for that?
I followed up with DOE and Stan Sawyer, who runs the project, and he didn't see it as a problem.
Okay, great.
Yeah, basically it's a landscaping project with seating.
Okay. And just, I think everyone or a few people have already said this. I know we've been talking about some type of shade structure at GMS since 2015, I want to say. And it's just hard when we've done campus reviews or site walks and it's, oh my gosh, it's so bright out here. Like we could have more students outside learning if we had a covered structure. I 100% feel this is exactly what COVID funds and this influx of cash was meant to be. If we're going to be purchasing vans that we're going to have forever, I think just a very small investment in enhancing the outdoor spaces on an area of a campus that we likely wouldn't have to touch moving forward. We know the areas already that are most likely going to be switched around if something was to happen. Just my 2 cents. But I also know that I'm a broken record about this. So
I don't think you're a broken record about it, Kate. Tyler, you have a comment.
Well, Kate answered or asked my comment about, if our reasoning is to not include something like this on our campus because it is a permanent choice. I mean, that argument doesn't hold well on the other items that we have on this list. We're choosing to upgrade Chromebooks that aren't necessary, that are not needed right now for COVID. So I just, it's clear that there's some people that aren't supportive of it and some that are. And so I don't know how we move on from this, but it is something that I feel should be a priority and should be a way that we could accomplish through Scott, whether it's your idea. I would be curious on how we would accomplish it if we did it through the first round. I'm not clear on how that works.
I'm sorry, Tyler. I didn't know if that was a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, the way we would accomplish it is we would. A pergola would probably cost somewhere around $50,000 in order to get one the size and what you would like to have.
So I'm just gonna, if it's okay, I'm not sure that it's gonna cost $50,000. There's places all over, nonprofits all over the state. Birth Roots, for instance, in Portland, just put one up. That was a 10 by 10 structure that was under $6,000.
Yeah, that wasn't what I was talking about, Kate. Tyler, what I was talking about was one that was large enough to provide a meaningful shaded space. And we had a design done some time back. Certainly the size and the scope and what you want to do. I'm not trying to make this as some kind of super large purchase. I'm just telling you that when we did an estimate the last time and we had one designed for back there, it was between $40,000 and $50,000 to do that. And probably the time value of money brings it a little higher to that, up to that amount. And in my mind, I was thinking if a classroom's 800 square feet and you wanted to be able to get a few classrooms out there and so forth, you'd look at something that was probably, 1,600 to 2,000 square feet, maybe, that might look like something that could create an area, much like you might see in a park or you might see at a state park or something like that. The size of it is debatable on what we want to do and how we want to do that and the size we want to create for people. But that's kind of what I was thinking in my mind about that. And getting it into round one, I would try to contact the state and I would see if we could do a budget transfer in order to take that out of round one and see if we could get it supported in round one, if that's the direction that people wanted to go. So I'm purely just seeing how to move that forward and how to figure it out.
So thank you, Scott. That's super helpful because you know all about how the inner workings of this. So if we wanted to take that action and this would be I don't know if it's a vote. I guess I'm curious on process at this point from the board. Mm-hmm. How would we know with confidence that if we were to leave the lines here as they are for outdoor learning, that we would be able to allocate that money if you were successful with the state? Is it a vote from the board? How do we do this?
Well, I mean, certainly, I feel you can vote to change whatever's on this if the board wants to vote on that and change it, or you can just do a poll of who's in favor or whatever, right? But we could look at that, and the other option is if the board did decide go that direction and we couldn't get it through the COVID funds, I would suggest that you take it out of capital reserve funds in order to make that happen, if that's of an interest to people. That way you've got the fallback. So if it doesn't go through the COVID funds, you've got the fallback on having it come out of capital reserve funds, which are clearly, dictated for those types of items. And we would have to have an architect draw something up so that we'd have something available, do it rather quickly. And then I know Jeff had a conversation with Bill Shane today, and I didn't know if you wanted to talk about that, Jeff, about the process that we could look at because it's under 3,000 square feet.
Yeah, Bill told me that if it's under 3,000 square feet, which I assume this would be well under 3,000 square feet, it doesn't require planning board approval. It just requires, or site review, just requires a staff review, which means that the staff at the town hall, which is the planner and the codes enforcement officer, would review it and to see if it would be acceptable. So that's a process that we can use on something that's a smaller project like this.
Yeah. And Tyler, it could look like two smaller pergolas than one large one, right? Could be a variety of different options in order to do that, if that's the direction people wanted to go or the board wanted to go.
Okay, so that's the direction I would like to go. I'd love to hear from others on the board before we move forward. I guess I still am a little unclear on what the board needs to do to push that forward.
Can I suggest something, and you can decide as a board if you'd like to do it? The finance committee has recommended this list as it's presented. So I think the board would be voting to accept the finance committee's recommendation with an adjustment or whatnot, or modification. Or if you even wanted to take a separate vote on, since we're going back to the CRF round one funds, as Scott has suggested, I would actually take a separate vote to amend the CRF round one funds if we're able to do that with state approval. Since we do have 130,000 or so that has been, at this point, that we can spend.
Yeah, my recommendation would be to amend the first one, Jeff, to go through the first round of CRF funds and not this second round.
Yeah, I agree with you, Scott. I was just thinking if we're still trying to get that out of the CRF 2 fund.
Yeah,
I think the CRF 1 funds are is a better way to go. I agree.
Okay, thank you both.
Let me ask you this: how about we just look at these last two items and then you guys can debate it and make a determination of what you'd like to do. These were things that came out of finance. I wish that this had come up on Friday during the finance meeting. But the last two items that are on here requiring amplification from you, Jeff, the food service deficit requested at $90,000, and that is because of debt incurred in service of providing meals during the first round of COVID. I'm not the first round, but the end of last school year. That is debt from student meals. And then the other piece is focused on ventilation, or better ventilation at the high school. And that's looking at some of the windows within the math and science wings. And this was one of those things that the state felt strongly that would be an item that could be focused on by districts. And that is at 125.
Yeah, the food service deficit, as all of you know, since when we went into closure in mid-March, we were offering a lot of free meals, and we offered those free meals for 2 months without any reimbursement. The state started to reimburse us. I believe it was 2 months before. It might have been a little less than that before we started seeing some reimbursement, and it was only partial reimbursement.
It was for food, not for labor, right?
Correct, right. And not even labor. So that, we've been incurring that deficit since then, and that's very directly aligned with COVID. This certainly won't pay for, pay down your whole deficit, but it will certainly make a big dent in it, and it is allowable, at least under the guidance that we received from the Department of Ed. The other item that I saw on the list of guidance to districts for CRF2 funds was window replacement, which I was surprised to see that. But because it's related to ventilation, it's, again, we don't know this, as Kevin and Scott have both said, we won't know if any of this is actually approved until this committee looks at our application, which is different from the first round, and says yes or no on these items. And then it can still be audited later by the federal government, and they could say no. Hopefully the committee will be in sync with the Federal Department of Education and will approve it or not approve items, and we don't have to find out a long time from now. But this window replacement, I think, is important. We can't even open our windows, or keep them open, I should say, in some of the math and science classrooms, a lot of them. And so we have been slowly trying to replace them. This would not take care of all of it, but it would certainly go a long way to putting appropriate windows in those classrooms. And I was surprised to see this, and very happy to see this on the state guidance of probable acceptable items.
Thank you. So then I can step back on this if you'd like to debate the merits of any one of the entries on here and rework these, or I can stop sharing if that's helpful as well.
Thank you, Kevin. There are a couple more people in the comments. I wonder if we want to, looks like Peter has a comment. I don't know if you still have it, Peter, or not.
Yeah, I think I'll kill 2 or 3 birds with one stone. I think, first of all, I would really like to compliment the administration and the finance committee. I think given the short period of time that you've had to work with, I think this list that you have come up with, I think is a very, very good one, considering where we are, and I have no problem approving it as presented. The comment from Scott, I am absolutely opposed of putting any of this outdoor learning into a capital.
We lost you, Peter. Okay, we'll wait for Peter to come back. Jennifer, you have a question on the short throw projectors?
Okay, thanks, Tyler. This list that we're currently looking at of allocation expenses is different, has been changed since we met during the Finance Council meeting.
No.
It included buses on the one that we talked about.
Oh, Jennifer, you are right.
And I just.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yes, we should have pointed this out.
Right. So let's. I would just like to be really clear that the changes and kind of work through that a little bit since that meeting on Friday.
I thought the buses were pulled out before we left that meeting.
They were not.
No. And I can actually respond to that, Jennifer. You're absolutely right.
I was trying to bring up what we looked at on Friday, but I haven't had a chance to get to that yet. So yeah. Can you, I know it's probably a waste of people's time to kind of get into the details too much, but it is where did the money that was allocated for the buses then get put on here?
It went to staff. It basically went to staffing. I believe there's 200,000 on Friday, and you're right. And it's about $100,000 bus, a little bit over. So we applied.
And I believe that when we talked on Friday, the MIW short throw projectors, I didn't think was at that amount. And maybe I'm incorrect by stating that. So when we talked about it with Dirk when he was in the room as well.
I think it was about that amount. It might have been, we might have had to adjust that based on the number of classrooms we're talking about, but it was
Okay.
somewhere in the ballpark. But you're right, the bus was not on there, and Scott can give an explanation. We got
Okay.
information. I can't
Okay.
remember if we talked about it at the meeting or right after the meeting, but we got information that we probably can't do the bus. You're right.
Okay. I just didn't. So Scott, you're saying that the MIW short throw projectors were on there for 200,000?
Yeah, I'm saying I recall that being on the list for the finance committee meeting.
Okay.
But do you want to talk about the bus specifically and why we can't purchase the bus? I think we lost Scott. I can tell you
Okay.
that the bus, we got guidance from the state saying that buses would not be an allowable purchase for at this point. Well, actually, they could be an allowable purchase, but that you were going to have. There's all these rules that went with it. There's about 5 different rules that we would have had to meet. And Scott, I don't remember if you remember those rules, but one of them was timing, and I'm not remembering the rest of them.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I lost my internet access, so I was just scrambling to create a hotspot so I can get back on. So,
We're talking
yeah,
about the bus. Why wasn't the bus allowed?
Yeah, the reason we removed the bus is because if you had put in for a bus to purchase it in your existing budget, then you would not be eligible in order to get another bus unless it was directly related to COVID and directly a COVID issue. So we had put in for a bus, had filled out for state subsidy on it, and we weren't going to meet the criteria because we have not bought that bus out of this year yet. And we would have to buy our bus out of the general operating budget first before we could be eligible for any kind of bus purchase out of our general operating budget. So that's really where that came into.
Right.
Okay.
And it would be a lot harder to tie a school bus directly to the COVID funds. There's more of a need for the vans. Tying a school bus to the COVID funds, right now we have about 6 kids on every bus. So trying to tie that to some kind of social distancing or COVID issue would be difficult.
Okay. And Jeff, when I open up the Google Doc that we looked at, it's been updated, so I can't compare it to the two since I didn't print it off. So I can't really see where the changes are.
Yeah, I can definitely say that the staffing, we applied that bus for the most part to the staffing line, knowing that we needed more money there. So that was a change. And I don't know about the short throw projectors. It would have been right around 200. It might have been 175, but we might have gone back and looked at those classroom numbers again. And Dirk, is Dirk still on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you remember if that number changed, Dirk, between Friday and now?
I don't have the notes in front of me from that, but I do know that one of the issues that came up with the round 1 with the projectors for the middle school is that the different models that are available to get in place before December 30th was an issue. So we actually had to make an adjustment to purchase a projector that is available for a November shipment versus a December shipment. And it was a little bit more expensive. So I think there has to be a little bit of leeway to say, based on availability and what's a lot of things that are going to be back ordered, what can we get and fit in with the December 30th timeframe? And we might have to pay for a little bit higher premium projector, and that's why it could have increased that cost.
Dirk, are you able to just state, just for everyone, that if we're out of COVID situation, these short throw projectors they are of value to the teacher, and just kind of talk to that, because it kind of looks on here that it's just for live streaming, but those short throw projectors we use quite a bit in all the other classrooms in the upper grades. And there's value when all the students are sitting in one room.
Right. The short throw projector has a better presentation quality versus what the MIW has is ceiling mounted projectors, which are further back in the room. So if anybody stands up, you're basically creating shadows. And the short throw gives that ability for everybody in a cohort A that's in the classroom to have the images of everybody in cohort B who might come in live streaming to see that. It also has the ability to have all your components right up against the wall versus having things strung through the ceiling and down behind the walls and coming out. That makes sense.
Yes. And Dirk, what I was trying to say is that if, say, next year we're not in this situation, those projectors have value.
Oh, absolutely.
As everyone of cohort A and B are all sitting together and we're back, or we're moving forward into a better situation, they are of value in those classrooms.
Right. Not that it's a COVID situation,
exactly.
But the MIW projectors are our oldest projectors and are in line for being upgraded next in the whole K-12 ecosystem.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Right, but the initial purchase is really based on our, hope that we have live streaming that can happen on different occasions at Mabel Wilson School. The only other comment I was going to make about this whole list was that if there's an item for some reason that is not approved by the committee that's reviewing our application and we don't find that information out for 2 or 3 weeks or whatever it is, I would like to just mention that the quickest way for us to be able to spend the money, because we don't want to leave it on the table, and very legitimate way of being able to spend it would be to apply it to the food service deficit, so that we're not having to take that out of operating expenses in the next fiscal year or the next fiscal years. As I've mentioned before, and if we keep getting signals from the state, we're probably going to see a decline of 10% in our state subsidy for the next fiscal year. And so any opportunity to try to take out some of the deficit for food service is not going to happen next fiscal year. So that would be an area that I would, certainly strongly recommend that we try to pay that down if there's an item on this list we're not able to get approved for.
I'll just jump in. I think, Jennifer, your question was, how does outdoor structure be used if students need to be 14 feet apart outside? The messages that I've received from the middle school is that it would be used during recess time, during lunches, potentially during classrooms times, depending on when they would be scheduled. But Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, the 14 feet apart outside is if masks are not being worn. Is that correct?
Actually, 6 feet is, you can be 6 feet outdoors and take your mask off if you have gone to the place that you are going to. In other words, you're sitting down, all the students, we know that they're going to be socially distanced the 6 feet. Masks can be taken off only outdoors, not indoors. The 14 feet is for eating.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Jennifer?
Inside.
Okay. It's not that's not the feedback that I'm getting. So I'm just confused, but we don't need to deal with that. I guess, so what you're looking at, Tyler, is a very large structure if we're going to use it for recess time and for lunches.
That was the hope, and that's what's been communicated as the need this year. Prior, it's obviously been different. Kevin, I totally respect that we met as a group and recommend these lines, and so I want to acknowledge that and stick to what we have recommended as a committee. My hope is that we are able to continue to prioritize these things and not let them fall down below, out of sight, and hope that we can use capital reserve, like Scott has mentioned multiple times. This is just one of those things that has consistently been pushed off. So I will stick to the recommendation that I was part of, and I appreciate you calling me out for that. And so we can move on from there.
My singular focus on this is, when the administration came with these, and then considering what can be approved, what's in the spirit of what's been written in the guidelines, and then the horrible timeline to have these expenditures done by the end of the year. My deep hope would be that this would be like those PPP funds, where originally they were people who were granted funds had 8 weeks to spend it, and then it was extended to 24. Something like this puts an undue burden on the district to be able to think through these things that serve the community, but to do them in 7 days. And so it's challenging. I just want to make sure that everything that we put in here is going to be approved and allow us to move forward without incurring any debt. And I know that that's all of our objectives. If there are things in here that need to be adjusted, make a recommendation. Scott or Jeff, I know you're up against this being due on the 15th. If there are places that you...
Yeah, I'm actually I worked on the application this past weekend and today. It's a sizable application and it is due on the 15th. So it's nothing like round one. The second application is pretty intense. So we'd need to, basically, I need to wrap this up tomorrow and get it submitted.
Yeah, Scott, just a technical question. If the board chooses to go back into round one and look at the shaded structure.
Yep.
Do you believe that the round one will accept that at this point?
I believe that they would. I think we could make that change to the budget, and I think we'd certainly try to get it approved and have it meet the spirit of outdoor space. But I think that could pass the straight face test.
Okay.
So is that something that you could work? I know you've got nothing else going on, but is that something that you could have that conversation and report something back?
Mm-hmm. I had a brief conversation about it today when I was also the other day when I was talking about the outdoor seating area with the state, and certainly something we can discuss further. I think the biggest piece is going to be just getting the budget adjustment done to that, and how does that work? I haven't experienced that yet with the CRF funds, but I think it would meet the spirit of the use of the CRF funds if we decided to go that route in the first round.
Yeah, process-wise, I think it would be a good idea if the board is interested in us doing that. Knowing that we don't have an answer yet, but just to direct us to do that tonight if you're interested, because you've already approved round one, and it's basically this would be change to round one. So it'd be good to have that voted.
Yeah, the biggest piece about all of these is when it comes down to the end of the day, my name's on the application, and I have to be able to defend all these and the use of those federal monies for these purposes. So I'm comfortable with what's on the list, and I'd be comfortable going back and seeing what could happen in round one.
Well, I'm going to get things going here with a motion, and then it can be discussed afterwards. But right now, I would make a motion applicable to the second round, and that motion would be to approve the application as presented, but give the finance committee and the administration the authority to make changes within it should circumstances come up with the state. How's that?
That's great language.
The motion stands. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kevin. Any discussion?
I would just like to say, and maybe it's more applicable to the second one, but I would fight to the end to have these capital reserves touched until we get any better idea of any further little landmines that are out there and stuff that we've got to deal with. But maybe that's more applicable to the second one. But I just wanted to throw that shot across the bow.
Thank you, Peter.
Tyler, and again, you can see my desktop. When we were having these conversations on Friday and before looking at the things that the administration has put together on this, there are some of these that just, I guess I fully agree with what Mike Simmons said before, that by nature, these funds are intended to solve for the temporary concerns and issues as a result of COVID. And as I look at these, nearly all of those, I feel that they meet the spirit of that. This line 11, I think, is probably one of the most critical things up here, because we're going to come into more challenging times. And we've got to be prepared. These other things continue to complement the way that we deliver education at this time. And some of those other pieces, man, I'd love to have additional outdoor classroom space. I just will be sitting next to Scott if there's an audit that happens. And I just want to make sure that everything is going to pass muster so that we're not in our pocket unwittingly.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate all of that. So before we go to a vote, I just want to make sure we don't have to have a separate vote for any sort of adjustments based off of the motion that's been given in round one. So the motion is that we would have flexibility within the finance department or committee and administration to adjust if needed.
Yeah, I think what I heard was that was just applying to the second round, though. Unless I got
this
that.
motion is just the second round.
I wanted to clarify that. Okay.
Mike Williams, you had a comment before we go to a vote?
I do. Really quick, just again, I really appreciate the work the Finance Committee, Scott, and everybody on pulling this together. I think it's really great. To your point, Kevin, that line 11 is critical. The food service deficit is critical. These expenditures are incredibly important, and I support all of them. I do. Again, I just that argument about we have to be careful about temporary spending, and not spending it on permanent structures. I mean, we're doing that with the amphitheater. We're doing that with the live streaming. So I don't think that argument holds well at all. But I totally get if people disagree with that. But with regards to this, we're talking about this. I completely support this, and I will vote for it. I would really like to consider it after this, discussing further about, at least the pergola piece, because it's something we have talked about for years. That's all.
Thank you. Kate?
So when I got this email, I opened it up, I read it, and I think everything in here is sound. It is a great usage of this money. I think it targets the areas that it needs to target. It's very clear to me that this was a very well thought out list by the Finance Committee. And as I said in just the email, I just hope that we continue to think about a permanent structure. So I will support this as presented, and I echo everyone's comment that this is a great list, and I think it's going to address a very wide variety of the district's needs due to COVID.
Thank you, Kate. Any more discussion? And I see your comment is agreeing before we move on to a vote. All right, so seeing none, let me get my roll call list up here again. Okay, so when I call your name, please vote either affirmative or not. Peter Bingham?
Yes.
Kevin Desmond?
Yes.
Margot Harrington?
Yes.
Ann Maskamovich?
Yes.
Tyler McGinley, yes. Kate Perrin?
Yes.
Mike Simmons?
Yes.
Jennifer Stewart?
Yes.
Mike Williams?
Yes.
Elias Leggett Barr?
Yes.
And Madison Dalton?
Yes.
Great. All right. I would, before we move on to our last item to adjourn, I would like to make a motion to a second or a separate vote and to amend the first round of CRF funds to allocate funds for more outdoor learning space, specifically for a shaded structure at on campus.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
I just have one comment. Generally, I guess this is to, again, the Finance Committee is a generic thing, but we have just in these two things committed, spending $3 million. And given the fact that we don't know what's going to happen in 21, 22, that I don't expect to see any increases, in fact, decreases in the IT budget for 21, 22. Also, maintenance equipment and all this, I think especially the IT folks, you've had your shot at this thing, and I don't want to see a whole bunch of stuff thrown into next year's budget because we're not going to be able to do this. So you've had your shot as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Any further discussion before we take a vote?
Just a question, if I could.
Mhm.
So when, and this really goes to you, Scott, when you look, and you may not have this in front of you, but is there a line item that you would be targeting within that first set of funding that would be targeted for this?
Yeah, I would take the only area that I would look at right now is I would take a look at the technology area where we had the $900,000, and I'd look to reallocate funds from technology if we were to do this and the board was to determine they wanted to do this, and allocate those funds towards a facilities project, which would be further down in that application. And again, it's all pending what we can do. And then we're going to have to look at the timeline and see, just how quickly we can pull this off, get it before the town, get the plans done, and get all that done to try and get it done in a timely fashion. So there's a lot that has to be done, but we'll start with looking at the budget with the state first and see what we can do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Jennifer, you have a question?
I do. I was just pulling up the spreadsheet in front of me. Are we proposing that the money that's in the round 2 funds for outdoor learning, that we're keep that, and we're keeping the 100,000 for the amphitheater, and then this permanent structure is on top of all of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Okay. I will go back to a roll call for a vote. Peter Bingham.
No.
Kevin Desmond.
Yes.
Margot Harrington.
Yes.
Ann Masimovich.
Yes.
Tyler McGinley, yes. Kate Perrin.
Yes.
Mike Simmons.
No.
Jennifer Stewart.
No.
Mike Williams.
Yes.
Elias Leggett Barr.
Yes.
And Madison Dalton.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I appreciate everybody's time tonight. This is a lot to do in a short amount of time. It's tricky. And Scott, I just want to say thank you so much for all that you have in front of you over the next couple of days. This is a huge undertaking. Thank you. I know that this is a big, big project that you probably didn't even know was coming in August, and here it is. So
Thank you. It's hard to have somebody throw a bunch of money at you and tell you to spend it.
yeah, it's a funny situation.
It's an oxymoron for me these days. So
Yeah. Okay, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Peter. All right, last roll call. Peter Bingham,
Yes.
Kevin Desmond,
Yes.
Margot Harrington,
Yes.
Andrew Masimovich,
Yes.
Tyler McGinley, yes. Kate Perrin,
Yes.
Mike Simmons,
Yes.
Jennifer Stewart,
Yes.
Mike Williams,
Yes.
Elias Leggett Barr,
Yep.
and Madison Dalton.
Yep.
All right, thank you, everyone.